many encounters among us that will help us build an initiative, do a call to action in a topic that we don't claim to be complete experts on it, but it's more an open dialogue that we want to start with all of you. On Men Against Gender Violence. This event is part in order to bring together community leaders and service providers for discussion to engage and educate men on issues of gender violence. Our experience in the trenches has made it evident that compared a few weeks ago in an event in Queens, where she phrased the question. It was a very pertinent question. What are men doing? Where are men in this conversation? Why are we excluding them? And the idea is to create a counter-narrative that takes into consideration the perspectives and challenges of men in solving such entrenched phenomena. So before starting properly, I would like to do some proper recognitions and give thanks to certainly the Brooklyn Borough President, Eric Adams, for kindly opening the space to hold this event and displaying strong leadership in the work with immigrant groups here in Brooklyn. Certainly to our dear council friend, council member Carlos Mixteca, for spearheading initiatives that intensify the awareness, channel resources, and place gender and other forms of structural violence at the forefront of the political and policy agenda of government and non-governmental organizations and institutions in Brooklyn and elsewhere. I would also like to thank Commissioner Rosemont Pierre-Louis, the New York City Mayor's appointee for the Office to Combat Domestic Violence, for lending us the kind support of Ms. Janice is here? Oh, no, she's not? Okay. Well, Lisa Arosqueta, certainly, the Director of Outreach, who for the past months, at least for me, has been instrumental in Mixteca's approach and methodology in this difficult issue, and for inviting us to be certainly of standards. Certainly another thank would be to our dear friend and mentor, I would say, Ambassador Sandra Fuentes, the Consul General of Mexico in New York, for taking a stand. Consul Sarah is here from the Political Affairs Department representing Ambassador Sandra Fuentes. She recently got acclaimed as an cultural practices that target the most vulnerable members of our community. Together we can, Juntos Podemos Foundation, formation of an initiative for and by immigrant women. We will touch again at the end of this event. Another thank would be to our distinguished panelists, each of which brings to the table very specific approaches. But I would like to mention that their comments in this panel are overall.
And like most of the awareness events that happen, we talk about women and the victims. But this side of the conversation is very important as well. Because in order to truly eradicate this problem that affects our communities and our neighborhoods, we really need to understand what the underlying causes are and how to give families the tools they need to prevent this. It's a really, really important conversation. I'm glad that Mixteca and Mixteca and community members are here. I've known Mixteca for a long time. The things you're doing in the community are absolutely wonderful. Me, myself, being Latina, I understand that domestic violence is very common. It's common in our community. It's something that we just sort of take as a thing that happens to us, to our women. And we accept it. It's part of this machismo attitude. It's part of almost our, I don't want to say our tradition, but it's part of our cultural history. And it's time to really address this problem. It's important that we understand that it's not okay. It's not okay that Bobby hits mommy, or that abuelito used to do this, and you know, this is why it happens. So these conversations here are very, very important. We kind of our president's office to be a partner in whatever we do moving forward. We want to help your mission, and we're here at your service. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And without further ado, I want to introduce our council member, Councilman Chaka, for this keynote.
Buenos días. I hope you're enjoying the coffee and the hot chocolate. And for us, some of us, we're mixing both of those. To make our Mexican cappuccino chocolate flavor. I want to start by saying that this is not always an easy conversation to have in our community. I think Dalia set the tone right. This is something that in so many ways, not just for the Latino community, but for our immigrant and low-income communities, the statistics are pretty clear. The panelists are going to go into the data, but the data is pointing to the fact that this is a rampant issue in our community. And while sometimes it goes up and down, it stays. And the point we're going to make today in this panel discussion, and really in this, because it's not going to end today, the homework is going to be for us to keep creating these calls to action in our communities that we take back. And I see so many organizations here that have been working on this for a long time now, that we address all the pieces of it, and really calling out men in our communities to be agents of change, to be positive role models in our community is what we're trying to do. And all of us are going to talk a little bit about how we can do that and make that happen. So when Eduardo called me and said, we need to do this together, and this is something that we've been talking about for a while, I said yes. And part of what I want to do today is just talk to you about my own story, and really me growing up in a family that was difficult, but really defines for me the issue. Growing up, I was in a family of 7, so there were 7 brothers and sisters. I had 2 older sisters that really became my mothers. When I talk about it, it's so quick in politics, product of a single parent family. My mother was my everything, and grew up in public housing with all government subsidies, and then I kind of move on and keep talking about whatever the politics of the day is. We're going to concentrate on that. I'm going to unpack that for you. So I grew up in El Paso, Texas, border town, very Mexican, where the culture or I should say, our culture really embeds every corner of my existence growing up in high school, in public school, and having all my tias and my tios and my cousins, and so this is my family growing up in El Paso, Texas. Because we were in where we were, low-income family. I remember the first time, one of my first earliest memories was my father came home and he was part of a union, and in Texas, if you strike, they can fire you. And that was the moment where I saw the first anger. What I'm saying to you is that this is all connected in some ways in my family to economic opportunity, and my father lost his job. And that's when I saw the decline in his role in my family, and I saw him leave. He would leave for 3 to 4 months, claiming that he was working, and that's when I also saw the violence. And so that's when I saw alcoholism rise in my family, not just in my father, but also in my mother. And that's another thing that we see in our communities, alcoholism, that really breeds that violent opportunity for people to lash out. And what that did for me was to define power in our family, define how people were able to express the powerlessness that my father was expressing after losing his job and not really ever getting back on his feet. That translated to consistent, and when we define domestic violence, when we define intimate partner relationships that have violence, this is about using every opportunity that you have to coerce and to put power over somebody else. And that's happening between our men and our women. What also continued to happen was we were often left with no other opportunity than to kick my father out. And so We're going to hear about tools today that really offer opportunities for kids to enter the conversation, for our parents to have new ways to access new opportunities to change the conversation, not just respond with violence. A lot of times, all I was able to do when I was in my what I would call moments of despair were, as a kid, to take a shoe and try to intervene into what I would see as fights between my mother and my father. Now, I think Adalia said it right. This is sometimes where it's like, this is what just happens. And in so many ways, I always thought that this is what happened in every family. And I wasn't wrong. This is what my tios and tias did all the time. After those long parties, those long drinking, binging parties, I think some of you know what I'm talking about, when we all get together as families. And often they turned into very violent moments between cousins. And so this is just the world that I grew up in, and didn't have many opportunities to do anything about it except to respond with my own ability, my own physical force, which wasn't a lot as a kid. This is what I'm hearing today in Sunset Park. When I talk to kids and when I hear people not having the opportunity to do something different. And this is what we need to change in our city, in our communities, and in our organizations to bring these tools for kids to be able to talk about it. So I'll leave that moment and bring you to another part of the discussion. I also came out in high school as an openly gay, as openly gay. That also created another opportunity for us to talk about gender for me in my family, but also in politics that I wanted to enter. And so this is another thing that we need to redefine for ourselves in our communities, is understand what it means. Understand that we have families that aren't just father and mother. And for someone like me who wants to one day create a family, this is an important topic that really addresses multiple places for us to impact families and define what it is to be in a committed, safe space for family. And so the gesture that we want is to have a conversation about men, but really have a conversation about violence in our communities, in our families, in Sunset Park, but across the city. And the last thing I want to say, and really what I want to do is offer the panelists to come up and talk. And I want to stay up until for 20 or so more minutes. But really think about calls to action that address some of the institutions that are embedded into our community. And I want to lift up one, and that's the NYPD. When I think about resources that we need to transform as avenues of opportunity for discussion, the NYPD plays an important role. Almost 2 years ago, we passed a piece of legislation that I authored to bring an identification for everybody. This is accepted by the NYPD. This is an opportunity for us to interact with NYPD to do a couple things. One, if there's something that requires a summons of some sort, say you're riding a bike on a sidewalk or whatever it is that you need, you can take a summons. And if you're an undocumented person, and so many of the people that we're trying to reach are undocumented in our community, you can have a more positive interaction with the police department, but give you a summons and you can walk and not be pulled into the precinct. But the other side of it that I don't think we always talk about is that you can actually report a crime using your identification, your new IDNYC. And that's something that we need to take out to our communities to actually report these crimes. The statistics that are coming out right now, we do not believe tell the full story about what's happening in our communities. And so this is something I'm hoping we can work with all the organizations that are here today to increase the reporting that's not happening right now. This gives us a fuller picture about what's actually happening and allows us to put resources, this is all about resources, to our communities. And that's something I'm hoping as a call to action we can really form and take out to our communities to increase that reporting so we can actually see what's happening in our communities. And again, this is not just in our Latino community, but in our entire low-income and immigrant communities, where we're seeing so much of what we're seeing. We're seeing so much of what is happening. And so I'm hoping that we talk about that. how to build those relationships so that people feel empowered to walk into our precincts and report these crimes, so that the precincts can come into our communities and take that information. And as I close, what I want to also say is that one of the most beautiful things about being Mexican for me, and also being openly gay, and these are all part of my identities, is that we have so much spirit and vibrance in the celebration of our cultures. And that is something that we can build. And I've seen that over and over again in our communities with leaders that are creating new immigrant opportunities for expression of our culture. And that is the culture that we live. Not the culture of violence, but the culture through our music, through our food, through our history, through our struggle to come to this country. Those are the things that create a different dialogue that we can all come together around. And so the art, the music, the way that our families love, the ways that our families define family as Latino, as Mexican for me, is what we need to live in these moments to address the violence that we see so rampant in our communities. And it's only through that I think we can actually make some changes. And we are so excited with Mixteca and all of you and the borough president to make that happen. And so today is about defining what it is our calls to action, and I hope we can get there together. I have no doubt that we're going to be able to make that happen. Thank you.
In the Latino community for over 15 years. She received her bachelor in psychology from Queens College, serving the Peace Corps in Ecuador, and received her master's in social work from Columbia University. Ms. Rubio founded Voces Latinas Corps, a non-profit organization targeting immigrant Latinas living with at risk for HIV/AIDS and immigrant Latinas experiencing violence. Ms. Rubio takes the issue of HIV/AIDS in the Latino community very seriously, as Latinos continue to be one of the highest groups getting infected with HIV and the fastest progressing to AIDS at disproportionately alarming rates. In September 2006, she received the New York City Social Justice Fellowship, which allowed her to dedicate time and develop Voces Latinas, a non-profit organization working in Jackson Heights. I recently went to a talk at Voces Latinas, and I was impressed at her methodology, and that's the reason I decided to invite her, because contrary to what happens in many groups, the way she does it is that she actually goes to those places where the women are. She goes to the what I call the male-dominated environments, and I would like to ask her in this presentation, what's that experience of facing the world of powerful men making and profiting from this tremendous labor. Also, let me introduce a few of them. Marlon Walker, he's the coordinator of Connect and Paul, first of all, for a round of applause. Marlon Walker, he's coordinator of Connect Men and Boys programs. Mr. Walker is a full-time trainer and educator for Connect Training Institute and Connect's Community Empowerment Program, with 12 years experience working with families and youth that have witnessed violence. He is also one of the trainers for the Understanding Domestic Violence, Essentials and Intersections, and was co-trainer for a collaborative project called Men and Women as Allies that trains Verizon staff and management on domestic violence and workplace bullying. Mr. Walker currently facilitates Hombres Dialogando, bi-monthly support group for Spanish-speaking men struggling with violence in their relationships. He facilitates several of the groups in the city. He also facilitates workshops for high-risk adolescent boys and girls in high school fatherhood programs, job placement programs, and re-entry programs, working with men to understand the importance as fathers, providers, and productive human beings. Mr. Walker co-facilitates Connect's monthly men's roundtable with co-executive director Quentin Walter, as well as provides technical assistance and capacity building for their CBO partners throughout New York City. A round of applause to Ms. Walker. And last but not least, our very own Narcisa Loza. She's been working in prevention programs since 1997. She became a program director and worked in 1997. And she has been helping communities to prevent children to go to foster care. Narcisa also has worked with families that have been victims of domestic violence, issues with mental health, and substance abuse. Narcisa Loza is the co-chair of Council of Family and Child Caring Agency for Manhattan, COFCA. Narcisa serves the Lower East Side as co-chair and community partnership program in the community partnership program and community representation, as well as helping the Lower East Side community in general. Currently, Narcisa is also the director, the coordinator of the Unit of Domestic Violence at Mixteca organization, and the challenges that I see Narcisa facing every day are amazing. They touch me very directly because many people that go to Narcisa first come to me and talk, and so I can only tell you that what we have in Mixteca is something very sad, but also very encouraging because of the way that Narcisa is currently facing. So a big round of applause. So, I wonder if we could start with a very brief video, just to, as a means to prompt. It's very, before we start with Narcisa,
Asesorar y controlar los centros de educación infantil privados de todo el país es una tarea clave.
La infancia es crucial, que esté bien atendida, que esté
I have to make very well into the New York bench.
No sabes contener una familia. Eres un poco hombre.
Tu lugar está en la cocina, atendiéndome.
Si tú no puedes, ya habrá otro que sí pueda.
Lo único que sabes hacer es gastar el dinero.
Me voy a llevar a los niños y jamás los volverás a ver.
Contigo no siento nada, por eso me voy con otra.
Siempre has sido muerto de hambre.
Esta es la última. De esta no te salvas.
Ni golpes que duelan, ni palabras que hieran. Igual violencia de ella. Toma parte y actúa. El silencio estimula la verdad.
So, this was just a very brief prompt to open the conversations for Narcisa to tell us her experience with gender relationships in your workshops. How's it been? How do you see this in comparison to other communities?
Myself and Mixteca is not only to say to the woman, you have to leave your partner, or to the person, you have to leave your partner because you're facing violence, but also my job was to keep in my mind the children safe, first and foremost, and to keep the family together. So my journey began in 2013, and I began with women. And as the video stated, he hates me, I don't like him. My kids were removed. That was the reason they came to Mixteca. You need to help me, I need to know where they are. And then the exploration began. Tell me how it happened. So we were in a party, exactly as Councilman described. We had a few drinks and then fights began. And then someone called the police and the city came and removed my kids. That was the first step of the work. So basically, I work with the moms, I work with grandmothers, and my second step was to say, where is dad? Or dad is in jail, or dad is removed from home with order of protection. I felt that my job was not complete if I would not work with the other partner of that relationship. So the view was shifted a little bit from Mixteca. I felt that I needed to make that call for that other partner or male that was out there somewhere. So either the mom could not get in touch with that other half, which is the dad, and I would say, can you tell dad to come and see me? And the mom would say, well, I have an order of protection, I don't know what that means, and it's in English. My kids are not there, I'm removed, we have a social worker chasing us. So I would make that call. And that response, well, who are you? And why do I have to see you? And my answer is I didn't want to, very sensitive and delicate, I didn't want to say that the mom was seeing me. I didn't want to say that my mom had told me. I said, I heard you are not home. Can you come and see me? And they would come, and they're still coming. And I would work with them. I would start exploring and making sure, first of all, safety for him, safety for the mom, for the children, and sit and have a conversation and say to them their reaction, what do you think I can do for you here? And then they would tell you different story than what would be now. Oh, I just pushed her and she broke her teeth, I didn't do it, or deflecting, I did it because I was drunk, but I want to sober, I don't do it. So I have a conversation with them very safe and try to make him understand and educate and empower them. Violence is not the first thing a man can do. There are other things you can have. But then it will be, that's the norm in Latin America. Not only just in Mexico, Latin America. We are the machismo, we need to, she's the only one that needs to cook. She doesn't have to go out, and things will come out legally and verbally. So basically my job has been and still is to empower them, to educate them, to give them all the resources. I have men that went through my session and learning English, and they want to do more, attend to school, they're taking the GED, they are empowered to go to college. The view has shifted, and some of them still come to see me. And the beautiful thing that I see in my job is once they know that we're there, and they feel that the friend is going through the same situation, they continue to come. So I love what I do, and my job, as I said, is to keep the children safe and the family together. And I'm there nights, Saturdays, to work with the families.
Well, next intervention should be by Ms. Natalie Victoria. As I said, I had the pleasure of visiting Voces Latinas.
First, good morning, everybody. I'm Natalie Victoria, Executive Director of Voces Latinas, and thank you so much for this invitation. I'm a Queens person. Brooklyn is new to me, but I love being here. So good morning, and thank you again. So just before I get to that, I just want to say Voces Latinas is a little bit unique in that we do both HIV, we wear two hats, HIV prevention and domestic violence or violence, okay? And so normally, well, I don't want to say normally, but most HIV organizations, domestic violence organizations have an anonymous site or anonymous phone numbers. We don't. You could walk into our office, or anybody can walk into our office and receive services. And we do that because we want everybody to come in and get tested for HIV, get condoms, get prevention services, information, but at the same time we're delivering the prevention on violence as well, that message. because we saw very early on that many of the women that were living with HIV, immigrant Latina women, were also experiencing violence. So we could not do one without the other. So then this comes to Eduardo Junction, where you know how Times Square kind of cleaned up, but now it's in Jackson Heights, Roosevelt Avenue. And so all of that activity that used to go on in Times Square is now here on Roosevelt Avenue. And so how could we, being an HIV and violence prevention organization, ignore what's happening out there at certain hours of the night? It's all the time. You don't have to be an FBI or detective to see what's going on in the middle of the day in massage parlors and salons and just your regular businesses sometimes. You just have to watch. And so what we try to do with our work, wearing our HIV hat, HIV prevention hat, because we go in there with our mobile units and we offer free HIV testing, is we partner with a lot of these business owners, and mainly the bar owners, the bar and the club owners. I know in the HIV world, we traditionally have been going into the gay bars, and they've been great allowing us to come in and partner with them, do testing there, do outreach right in front of their bars. But we also target the heterosexual bars, where we know trafficking or forced sex or just survival sex is happening. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Chica cards and the $2 dances. I could talk more about that another time. But that's where we go in those bars. But these are, we just can't, nobody could just go in there from one night to the next. We have to develop relationships with the bar owners. And that's what we've been able to do because of our Trans Latina allies. Our Trans Latina allies years ago were bringing this information to us and saying, this is going on, you guys have to get out there. So they literally walked us to the bars, introduced us, and said, they're okay, Voces Latinas, this is what they do, this is who they are. And since then, we started with entering maybe like 4 or 5 bars. Now we have over 40 bars and clubs that we go into. And a lot of them now are asking us to test inside their bars. So this is a huge accomplishment for us because before they didn't even want us on their block. So who are the managers and the bar owners? Are many of them, not all. We have our set of women, but they're mainly men. And so the men, many times people at the beginning of our work would criticize or question and say, how could you be doing this? How could you be going in and giving condoms? How could you be promoting this work? But who is going in? Who else is going in, talking to these women, having access to these women and men, because the men are immigrant Latino patrons. They're probably alone, they're lonely, they miss their families, they want touch, they want love, they want affection, they're looking for the meseras, the dancers. So it's a very sad situation when you go in there and you observe this because it's an immigrant Latino mainly, so I'd say 99% population that are involved in this work. And then the managers are also immigrant Latino managers or borrowers. So we have to go in. There's no question. Our work, we're right there in the corner of 83rd and Roosevelt. We have to go in. And so this is what we do. We work a lot with promotoras. Promotoras are women from the community. They have no fear of their community because they're from the community. They're commuting in that area. So a lot of times we hear, oh, very dangerous work. But for them, we don't feel it's dangerous because this is our community. And so they're the ones who are our frontline workers because they age the community, particularly women. Other women can identify with them and they can identify with the women, and they begin that conversation. I know there's this whole thing with social media on Facebook and Twitter, but not every community is communicating this way or getting accessing information this way. There's something to be said for one-on-one engagement and talking and hearing our similar accents and talking about our similar cities and towns in our country. That's something to be said for gaining the trust, and that is what our promotoras do on a daily basis. I say our promotoras are PhDs, or Voces Latinas, because without them, I don't know how we could be reaching the community that we reach on a day, and make the impact, I think, because to be able to get into 40 clubs and bars, is something that I sometimes can't believe, but we are doing it. And they're putting up our posters, they're putting up our brochures or pamphlets and our information, our condom packets with our information in there. They're not hiding it, they're not throwing it, because we do secret shoppers. We go in, we have people go in and see if our stuff is still there, our posters are still, and they are. And aside from the clubs and bars, we do also partner with the regular business vendors, which are bodegas, which could be hair salons, which could be different stores, vendors along Roosevelt Avenue, to put up our prevention and violence posters so that it speaks to the communities. And I'm just going to say lastly, our men in our community, our Latino men, they want to do something. Because when we talk to men, we even have men coming and ringing our doorbells and looking for services and wanting to do, asking what they can do. But I think it's that, and Marlon can speak more to this because Marlon has run the active groups. But I think it's that because of the machismo that we have in the culture, and all, it's like difficult to get the participation maybe right away, or talk about that, oh, I'm in a support group for men, and what will my other men counterparts feel, I think. So, but there's definitely a need to begin this. There's definitely a need for funders to understand that in our community we have to do things a little bit differently. But shelters are not always the answer for our women. Within a week they're back. They're isolated here, they've been more isolated there. Maybe doing more, I love hearing what you do with the couple, with the man, involving the man in the counseling sessions or in the conversation. We can't just do no disrespect, but mainstream kind of work, where you put shelters, you separate families. We can't do that in our community. We shouldn't do that anymore. We have other non-traditional ways of approaching this work. But I do want to say men are constantly wanting to get involved. We just need to, I think, partner maybe more with groups like Marlon's group and find out how we can get those resources, that support, to bring it to areas like Jackson Heights. And you never know, maybe even other clubs and vendors will, because if they give us their space to test, why would they give us their space to do groups or to do meetings or to do planning meetings? So I just want to say, our men, I love driving down Corona and Jackson Heights and watching the men take their kids to school. I see that more and more, picking up from school. We observe this all the time. So our men do want to get involved. They do care. I just think it's us to come up with these creative ways to get over that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nathan. And their participation, and also that if you see in your daily work a way out of this, breaking this cycle of violence, this catch-22, where apparently there's a dominated and a dominee, but at the end of the day, no one wins. How, in your experience, are we breaking this cycle of violence?
Ooh, that's a lot. Good morning, everyone. I don't know, this work is very unique, but it's also very personal. And I think that when we were talking about men, to me, the work is working with men is about the folks who are doing the actual work. That's more than participants, right? Good story. I remember when I first started doing Hogar de Atlanta, my first year, I had 15 guys from all over Latin America, Mexico, Puerto Rico, Colombia. And at the end, I do this exercise called the hot seat. So we sit in the middle, and everybody talks about something positive about you, something to work on. And I put myself also in the circle. And with Latin America, we have this respect when it comes to teachers, medical Chinese teachers, and all that. So I challenged them and said, tell me, what can I work on? And they got together, came back, and they told me, you know what, we admire you, we want to follow you, you are a great leader, but we have no idea who you are. And I was like, wow. Right? Because it became one of those, it's them and it's me. And I had to like really really process that and take accountability for myself. It's all right. I can go keep doing it the way I'm doing it. I'm going to get one type of results. But I'll put myself in there with them. So the next group, the same guys came back. And this time I opened up. And it was healing not just for them to hear me, it was also healing for myself. And I understood there that this work is more about me than it is about them. If I don't practice what I preach, how can I really believe? Right? I mean, now of course it's something to shut up because I talk too much. But the whole idea is that we as men, we have to understand that there's a lot of layers. We can approach every man the same way. Not every man is going to subscribe to this, and we have to understand that too, and I take it personally. We have to understand that, one, quickly, alcohol doesn't cause domestic violence, right? Maybe people who drink who are very happy. Folks who don't drink who are very abusive, right? And also, poverty does not create domestic violence. Flip it actually and say domestic violence creates poverty. And when you have women and children leaving their homes, leaving everything behind, and they're the ones that have to go to a shelter and eat everything, that's poverty. Right? This is the way we approach my work with men, is depending who's in the group. Either my father was a Mixteca from Puerto Rico, my mother family was political in Panama. I'm able to mix those things, bring that political consciousness to the table. We in Latin America don't really talk about domestic violence, but we do talk about dictatorship. We do talk about oppression of the government, and making this connection between that and what's happening at home. Yes, the government has their foot on your neck, but why do you have your foot on the neck of your family? The other people are not going to hear me with that. The other folks that I gotta get down and become the nigga for them to hear what I'm talking about, right? So it's different, it's unique as you said. Every group will give a different issue that you have to navigate. High school is a whole other ball game. Talking about gang involvement. Last year, this gentleman was called to go to a school, Walton High School, because the gentleman was falling asleep in the classroom. And they were like, no, he's falling asleep, you need to speak to him. So I spoke to this gentleman, and he said, yo man, I have 2 jobs, and I work full-time. I work full-time, and I go to school. I said, all right, break this down for me. So he said, at 5 years old, he was in his room, making breakfast for his sister. Both of his parents, drug users, and somebody knocked on the door, came to collect their money. He heard his mother told the guy, why don't you take my son as payment? The guy said, apparently, I don't do that. And he shot both parents dead on the spot. So at 5 years old, this boy had to become the man of the house for the sister, the younger brother who was in a wheelchair, and for the grandmother who didn't speak the language. 5, now he's 17. What am I going to tell this man what a man is? And instead of these folks in school, social workers, teachers, asking these questions, the automatic reaction was, this doesn't want to be in school, he's falling asleep. We have to ask histories and questions. I was told people, the last incident of domestic violence doesn't tell me anything. I need to know the history. What has happened, where you come from. And speaking to men, it's about being consistent. It's about being creative. It's about, even if 2 men show up, you're going to give the same energy for those 2 guys, even if you have 20. We have to put ourselves in there. Consistency and creativity is the way to approach it. And the language, no man is going to say, I'm an abuser, I'm a bad boy. You could definitely relate. Are you stressed out at work? Hell yeah. That's the entry point to have these conversations.
Thank you. So, I think it's time to open maybe the discussion to some Q&A. I'm sure you have a lot of questions for the panelists and for Councilmember Mixteca.
So I just want to say that. However, how that looks and how we go really clever, creative, and above all, be safe. So I'm going to be really honest with you that I was really thrown back when in your organizations. Now, I will be the first. I know a lot of I know a lot about transformative justice, restorative parenting. I think that there's an amazing curriculum 30 years old. Forgive me, maybe I am old school, but ability to create their own responses to end violence within their communities. I think that that's the way we really need to go. But I'm very concerned about the idea. It was the last thing that we would recommend to a person who is being abusive, because we know that abuse and have power over women. And we also know, and I know from running groups for men who abuse, that they don't know how to they don't understand that it's over. And so I was trying to say, or has threatened to sexually abuse my child. How do you bring these two people in the same room, or bring that you are helping her to remain safe and make the decisions that she wants to make? I'm very concerned about that.
Impressive. We work close together with this president in Sunset Park, and they're amazing. They have a tremendous community outreach program, and they visit us constantly, and they're always aware of what we're doing and how very helpful. So thank you very much.
Hi, how's everyone doing today? I'm Sergeant DeVere from the 7-2 precinct. I run the domestic violence unit there. We're over on 29th and 4th Avenue. I have a couple of my cops with me. We basically, every time someone fills out a report for anything with doing to do with domestic violence, it becomes a case with my cops, and we investigate everything. So we handle everything from arresting offenders and offering victim services to organizations like Mixteca or the Asian Women's Defense Alliance and all different places in our community. So I just wanted to reach out if there's anything that you need from us, just ask questions or any advice or anything more serious. We're always there for you, and you know where to find us.
Hi. So yeah, I might be for the officer and also for the panel as well. I'm really curious about the work that's happening to advance this with law enforcement and also with the hospitals. I moved here in March, Florida. My name is Isabel, and within 2 weeks of moving here, I came out of a bar in Jackson Heights, Roosevelt Avenue, at 2 a.m. and I was ready to buy a mansion. I was questioned by 6 different officers because I kept being transferred from one officer to the next until finally they got me to the right person to talk to. Each person questioned me for 1, 2, 3 hours. It was completely wasted my time because I was supposed to speak to the fifth or sixth person, get the medical attention that I needed. And even the conversation with the officers was like, you must have been drinking. Why were you drinking so much? Why do you dress up in such a feminine way? Are you sure you weren't leading men on? Were you selling sex services in Jackson Heights? Like the entire situation, they were told, that we can't pursue this case because with all this information, we don't have a way to prosecute. There's just too many things that are suspicious about you. So this man is still out there in Jackson Heights, the night that it happened, I saw him speak to a store owner, and so a week later I went to go speak to the store owner to see if he knew anything about this guy, and he's like, oh yeah, that's a really sweet man. I see him walk his dog here in the neighborhood once a week, every once in a while. And I don't think that those things are not true. I think, it's everyday individuals. I try to have friends, college students, PhD students, professionals, university professors, like all kinds of individuals, and consent is a major problem in our community. He could not even understand me saying no because I was wearing a dress and I was wearing makeup, and suddenly like no just wasn't something that I could process. And so yeah, so I'm really wondering about the work that's happening with law enforcement to train officers about how to, you know, talk to victims and work with victims, and also with the hospital, because it seems pretty unreasonable that if the police department is holding me for a week without giving me my police report, I should be able to get immediate medical attention, immediate intervention to address it.
Well, first,
to our children and making sure that they understand that the girl and the boy, same thing, same rights, involving our parents so that they can teach that as well. And I love what you said, Marlon, about being creative and bringing them together in different ways, because we're trying to do that as well with our family initiative, for example. And I think bringing them together for their children, you know, most men really love their children. So it's really such a good way to bring them, to then have that conversation later on as they start knowing you. Because, as you said, you can just jump in without them knowing you as well. And then I also, it's not that Ms. Rooney Chaka left, but maybe for you, Eduardo, if there could be some talk about having that ID that you guys have it in New York for families, to have it upstate would really help, because then these families will also feel safe to make those hard calls and be able to report crimes and other things. So thank you for organizing this. This is very nice.
Yeah, the ID program has been very successful at addressing some key issues that are really dear to our community. That's why we have, for example, a constant visit of the Mexican consulate, as we talk